Welcome back, America. We're very lucky to be joined by the chairman of the President's Intelligence Advisory Board. He's been on the show many times. He's also the CEO of the Trump Media and Technology Group and the former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee from 2015 to 2019 when he helped unravel the fake Russia collusion scandal. Joining us now, former Congressman Devin Nunes. Sir, good to have you back on the show.
Great to be with you, John and Amanda. As always, it's always a pleasure to be on, and I should commend you, John. Obviously, we were in Congress at the time. We did a lot of heavy lifting, but there were very few reporters who would actually do the digging and get to the bottom of it. And I know you were ridiculed for it, you were attacked for it, and so it's an honor to call you a friend. And I would also say that you're one of the few real journalists left in Washington.
Sir, a lot has happened in the Intelligence Committee the last few weeks. First, we had the CIA Director, John Ratcliffe, rescind 19 intelligence analyses that were inaccurate or didn't meet the standards of the intelligence community. It were infected by political bias. And now, in the last 48 hours here at Just the News, we've revealed that the intelligence community knew that China knew as early as spring of 2020 that China had hacked into the voter databases of Americans, just like they had done in Great Britain when a big scandal occurred. But here, our intelligence committee didn't tell us. They didn't notify key stakeholders. And we basically were kept in the dark for the last 6 years. What are we to make of those revelations?
So, John, let me try to unpack this. What I would first say is, we ran a decade-long investigation in the Congress into China. And so this new bombshell that you just dropped is very concerning to me, and it should be to the Congress even today, that this information likely was around in 2019, probably in 2020. I don't know. We're going to have to unpack this and figure out why this didn't get to the Congress and why this didn't get out to the American public. Clearly, this is a scandal that's brewing, and I'm sure you're going to continue to track it. I should also say, you mentioned Director Ratcliffe. As you know, I chair the President's Intelligence Board. We've been working directly with the CIA to depoliticize all of these agencies. The President Trump gave us clear direction that he wants the politicization taken out of these intelligence products. And it's been, a slow slog. We've been working to get this information declassified. We've been working with the different agencies to make sure that there's transparency. And I do commend the CIA under Director Ratcliffe's leadership for retracting those 19 phony reports. And I actually think there's probably many more that are there, but I think this is just the start of Director Ratcliffe is trying to clean up the CIA. Obviously, we're here to help. We're here to help all of the agencies as chair of the President's Intelligence Board, and we'll continue to do that.
So wait, are we talking about phony stuff or are we talking about real stuff? Because, I haven't seen this video. However, it seems like we're getting rid of the phony stuff and actually getting to the real stuff with regards to how China was able to infiltrate the voter database in the United States. Now, what they could have did with that information, I don't currently know. They may use that information in all sorts of ways, probably to retaliate on their own people who they feel like are assimilating into American culture, just to determine how they actually voted, see how loyal they are to the American society, to the American culture, or the Chinese culture. Because one thing that we do understand is that China has been working with this whole idea of birth tourism, which offers the elite in China to allow their children to come over here and have some type of citizenship, or actually gain citizenship in the United States and go back home to China, be raised in China, but still be allowed to vote in the American political system and have influence, of course. And China, like I always like to say, China is a country that is over 5,000 years old, while America's only 250 years old, right? China feel like more of the old guard of the world than the United States is supposed to be. While the United States is always being able to be seen as the cop of the world, right? China, you should say, is one of those world powers, and you know this is the relationship that I think that they have with Russia so much, is that they actually have their legacy is goes and runs deeper, not together, but their legacy runs deeper as a country in their separate sovereignties as China and Russia than the United States, that they feel more related to each other than a new country like the United States. The United States feel like the new kid on the block. However, let's let them continue.
This just the kind of the final point on China and their capabilities here. I think we should all, be very concerned that China is continuing to leapfrog. And if you don't have if you want to call it the truth, transparency, real intelligence agencies getting the information to the policy makers and the decision makers, it's a major problem. So,
Right, because we got this whole the Save Act that's up in up in the Congress right now, that maybe congressmen should know with regards to this whole issue, so that they can just hurry up and make a vote. Because listen, if the American people have this information and the politicians know that the Americans have this type of information, then what should be happening is the rush to be passed. The rush to pass the Save Act. But without that information, there is little pressure for politicians to actually go, and because it's us, they supposed to be representatives of us, right? So there is a lack of pressure from the people, we the people, right, to actually have politicians such as primarily the Democrats to deliver on this Save Act.
if you have a bunch of intel, it doesn't matter how great you are at gathering intelligence. And I happen to think that our military and intelligence in the United States are very good still, but it doesn't do any good if that information never makes it to the people that actually have to make a decision. And just to kind of go back to what I was saying, we ran this China investigation for a decade, and this is clearly information that should have come to us immediately back back when I was in Congress. So now, the President's Intelligence Board, we're working with anyone and everyone that wants to have transparency and wants to have accountability. We're there to help aid in that process.
Sir, not that Britain is a model for much of anything these days, but as John alluded to in this headline, they at least saw the gravity of what it meant for their country when their voter data was hacked. Our intelligence community has this air, or had, I guess I should say in the past, had this air of insouciance, and they didn't care or they did care and they knew, but they didn't care about the implications because politically they felt like it would help them. Which is it?
Well, this is the concern in John's early reporting here, that I have, I've only heard this from just the news. I haven't yet got any briefings on this, but I'm assuming next time I'm in Washington that we will get up to speed on this. So we need to really understand and unpack, what did they actually get? What did they take? What was in there? What was the data that was in there? And then who hid it, right? And I think this is going to be not only from kind of our perch and with our direction from the president to depoliticize, but I think the agencies themselves will need to do their own investigation and also get that information to Congress. I think there's still some great members of Congress out there. If you take Chairman Crawford, that has my old job on the House Intelligence Committee, or of course, Chairman Grassley, who has a long record of working with whistleblowers, that's where this really needs to get to that point. And then at some point, people have to be prosecuted or fired or demoted, or forced into early retirement. Something has to start happening with all of this malfeasance that's going on, which is why, just going back to the prior question about John Ratcliffe, the CIA director, retracting these 19 reports. Now the question is are there going to be changes made at the agency, which I know that Director Ratcliffe is continuing to work on.
So let me get this right. This happened 6 years ago. What happened 6 years ago? Wasn't that the election? Wasn't that Joe Biden versus Donald Trump? So if we didn't have this information, I mean, I don't know. They not necessarily giving about us details about how this information was used, right? Because it's only information. But you know what I'm saying? If they was able to they had the capabilities of getting this information, then what else were they able to do? You know what I'm saying? With regards to the voting process in the United States during the time of the Trump Biden general election, right? For presidency, right? So should we consider that Donald Trump is, wrong? Does Donald Trump actually know more than what he's speaking about? And how long has this information actually been out? And should it be kept secret? And the reason why I should say that, well, it's a good thing that it's coming out right now is because first and foremost, we need to pass the SAVE Act, right, to save our nation, right? So it is a good time for this type of information to be coming out. However, if we would have known about it earlier, what would it have done to the American system? And if that's the case, right, it didn't certainly have that much an effect on Donald Trump's last presidential election, to where he is able to have this second term now because he just did so well. Or, man, so it's a lot of plots and twists to this, right? And why voting is so important, and you can see how important it is with people like China, doing this, infiltrating the voter database. Because I guarantee you, I just know that it gets a lot deeper than this.
Sir, 4 years ago, with not much of us ever noticing or getting alerted to it, the intelligence community had a ombudsman who raised very serious concerns that during the last Trump administration, the CIA and its intelligence components did not fully give the president information on China, specifically related to its influence operations and its possible access to voter data. And they did so because, according to the ombudsman, they were politically biased. They didn't like the president. They didn't like the president's policies, and therefore they didn't want to give him ammunition to take action against China, essentially putting political views above their country. How serious an allegation is that by somebody whose job it is to police that activity?
The first thing that comes to my mind, John, is if you think back to that time period, you had a almost correlated kind of parallel efforts at that time, and I don't know that they were working together or not, but it was really in that same time frame. So if you remember, this is that time that the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Milley, I believe this was in 2020. Remember, he did that weird thing where he picked up the phone and called somebody over in China that said, don't listen to President Trump. And I'm just wondering if this is if these are related or not. But I think, we need to look at what this ombudsman had to say. The committees, everybody needs to kind of take get all the facts first, follow those facts, but then make sure people are held accountable. And I would just look at whether or not these are related, because the timing is quite similar, where you probably had multiple agencies coordinating together to not give the president information.
Mm-hmm. It's just mind-boggling.
I want to take you back to a moment after the 2020 election where the first ever director of CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, Chris Krebs, declared very audaciously that election was the most secure in history. Would he have been part of the intelligence community who might have had this information?
Or he should have, at least. And I thought that was ridiculous at the time, because you can't really go out and do assessments until months afterwards, once you're gathering all the intelligence, checking how the votes went. And the fact that somebody came out quickly and said, "Oh, there's nothing to see here," when clearly there were a lot of question marks that half of the American public still to this day doesn't believe that this was a free and fair election in 2020. And the more that time goes by, the more that you're starting to see some of this. So I really question, was that politically motivated at the time to quickly say, "Oh, there's nothing to see here," when clearly it doesn't make any, you just can't go and make those statements as, now we're all the way up to 2026 now, but the technology is only getting better. The capabilities of our adversaries are only getting better, and they were really good in 2020. And there were a lot of vulnerabilities that we knew about in 2020. And I'm not talking about in voting. I just mean across the board, the
Right.
Chinese, Russians, Iranians, continually. I think every time there was a briefing to Congress in the open threats hearing, these threats were talked about in the open public, that these capabilities existed. So to go and quickly make a point, you kind of add all these things up of the CIA hiding stuff. You have the CISA guy saying what he said at the time. You have Milley doing what he did with the Chinese at the time. It sure just makes me think that a lot of this is probably coordinated.
And it's funny because, excuse me, during the time of what you talking about in 2020, the director of the CIA was a female named Gina Haspel, and she was appointed by Trump. So, for you to be appointed by Trump and then hide this information, which must probably end up having them lose an election, right? Man, this is crazy. You know what I'm saying? This is crazy. Where you have this information and you know that there's a possibility, and this man Donald Trump keep on hunching at the fact that it was a rigged election, and he's trying to make improvements to it. And you got people like the Democratic Party, who's definitely not wanting to allow this SAVE Act to be passed for so many other reasons. Man, I don't understand. I swear I don't understand how these people are being able to call themselves elite in our American system. I'm speaking about Democrats. I just don't like them. I mean, it's not nothing personal. It's from, a country's perspective. Who do these people think they are? They're fighting for everybody else but the United States citizen. They're fighting for everybody else, other countries, immigrants, illegal immigrants, except we the people.
Yeah. Sir, you'll be using the PAP to look at some of these issues and just come to some resolution just from an oversight perspective, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, in the intelligence board, we are helping all the different agencies out, right? Trying to help get things declassified, get them to the places that they need to go. Solving problems in the short run where there's disagreements on intelligence. These are the things that the president's intelligence board does on a daily basis, and we'll continue to do that. We have a great team that works well with all the different agencies, and we're just every day team gets up and does their job, and then they have guys like me, figureheads that have some experience and try to give guidance where applicable. But of course, I have great relationships with all of the directors across the intelligence agencies, and we try to leverage those connections to try to carry out the president's mission, which is very simple: depoliticize intelligence.
Yeah. Well, you did so much of that as House Intelligence Committee Chairman, now at PIAB. It's a welcome move for all of our agencies. Devin, great to have you on the show today. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, so we definitely got to go get this information, because I want to go more into the details about what information that they gather, what information that we don't know about. I got to go find some paperwork. I got to go do some research, because I want to know all the pieces that is being played in this country that I necessarily just feel like, as a member of this nation, I need to know about. I don't know about you, but I want to know. because, like I said, this is home. And I don't think it should be infiltrated by no one else, especially when it's being politicized so much to where the politicians are basically just seeing this as a corporation instead of a nation that has a people that has passion for it. Like, we are more than just a corporation. The titles that we have economically are, in terms of like jobs and employment, are that is our identity. All right, that is like these individuals up here, or excuse me, these individuals who pretty much written up this report. What was his name? Uh, presidential, presidential whatever. He was a presidential advisor or presidential advisor to the national elections, whatever it was. John's John John Solomon and Amanda Head. That was their names. You know what I'm saying? How are we going to be a society if we don't have the truth? One of the reasons why a lot of people like to be on True Social, because it's different from other platforms in which you are able to, just get so much, you know, truth coming from just all the types of individuals. True Social is one of them platforms to where it's like, hey, look, it's not to say that, a lot of falsehood don't come. But if it's falsehood, trust me, it's not going to get any type of play on True Social, because the individuals on True Social will definitely try to do their homework. It's one of them cool platforms, and that's why you see Donald Trump on it all the time. I'm gonna go do some research on this, man, and I'm gonna go find out what type of information that they had with regards to this China infiltrating the voter database, and how all that is being able to be used in our societies for China to be able to have some type of influence to where they are consistent with dominating America. You know, and this is, when you look at their history, this is pretty much stuff that they have done throughout their history to gain influence into other countries. China used to be a big player in the world. Tiny Cross-H.U.G on the Trumped Up Live Show, man. Always remember to like, share, subscribe to the channel. Remember some also. Without further ado, it's a good day to be a soldier.